Hey folks, Bunky here, Bunkman Hangout. I am ready to launch. Got my pilot hat on, so I got my confidence going. Before I forget, please like, subscribe, brand new channel, and trying to get it going. So that really helps me. Last night it was raining and thundering here in Tejas in San Antonio, Texas, and I was going through YouTube, so I was awake, and I love watching history stuff, and I came across a video about America's two top fighter aces of World War II, and that's Bong and McGuire. Richard Bong had 40 victories, McGuire had 38. They flew the P-38. And, it got me thinking there's not much mention about the Navy's top gun, and that's David McCampbell. And in my opinion, even though he falls short in claimed victories, 34, what makes him the top gun of all of our aces of World War II? Well, there's a couple reasons, and I'll talk about those. But first off, what is an ace? So an ace is a pilot who shoots down 5 or more aircraft, right? So shoot down 5, you're an ace. You shoot down 10 double ace, 15 triple ace. All right. And that began in World War I. And the Navy has, historically fallen behind the Army Air Corps and the Air Force in number of aces produced, smaller Air Force. And so World War I, for example, Navy had one ace, and he was on exchange duty with the Royal Air Force, and he flew Sopwith Camels and had 6 victories. Now, come World War II, pace is going to pick up. There were 1,297 aces, and that's going to be, the Army Air Corps, the Marine Corps, and the United States Navy. And of that, the Navy's going to have 355 aces. Of those aces, the F6F Hellcat is going to produce 305 aces. And that aircraft was the ace maker. That aircraft had the most aces, produced the most aces of any U.S. aircraft of the war. But I'm going to concentrate solely on the United States Navy, on the United States naval aces, and their claims, and specifically David McCampbell. So there's World War I, World War II, the Korean War. There were about 40 aces, and there was only one Navy ace. And Lieutenant Guy P. I'm gonna botch this. Bordelon. He flew the F4U-5 Corsair, and he had 5 victories at night, and he was the only ace. We did have a runner-up. His name was Lieutenant Hoyce Williams, and his story is remarkable, and I'll probably tell that story at a later date. But he shoots down 4 MiG-15s on one mission, and that is the highest one mission score of any pilot of the war. Now, the Air Force, they shot down approximately 550 MiG-15s, and the Navy shot down 7. So the Air Force had the bulk of they saw the bulk of the air combat. Now, Vietnam comes about, and the Navy ends up with one ace pilot and an ace backseater. And Randy Cunningham is the pilot, and the backseater is Willie Driscoll. And the Air Force also has one pilot ace, but has 2 backseater aces. All right, so back to World War II. I'm going to take the claims at face value, what's accepted. So 34 victories is accepted as his score, 40 for Dick Bong, 38 for McGuire. So why do I say that? Well, there was a lot of overclaiming by all air forces of the war. And what I mean by that is, here's an example. Big Air Battle, 13 May 1943. There are 2 Corsair squadrons involved, VMF 112, VMF 124, and there's an Army Air Corps squadron with a couple P-38s thrown in. They're going to engage. There's about 40 aircraft total. They're going to engage 42 Zeros from the 204th and the 582nd Kokutai, which are basically squadrons. And in the end, both sides are going to claim about the same. The Americans were going to claim 18 victories. I think the Japanese claimed like 15 victories. And the actual score was 3-0 shot down, all the Corsairs, and 6 Corsairs were shot down. And so there's overclaiming on both sides. Now, were they overclaiming because, they, wanted to lie and look better? Probably not. For the most part, I think it was honest. You may hit an aircraft, some flames come out, and it split S's, and you think you got them. And, in reality, yeah, you hit it, damaged it, but he split S, and, he made it home. There's an actual case of there were 4 aircraft. I think there were Hellcats shooting at a single Zero. There's gun camera, and the pilots are so focused on that one Japanese Zero, right? And, let's say it explodes and it goes down, and you see it on gun camera clearly. But there were 4 aircraft from different positions shooting that same aircraft. So they get back and they say, hey, man, I got a 0. Intel officer looks at it, said, yep, you got it. And so there were 4 Zeros shut down. They all get credit for 1. In reality, only 1 went down. All right. So that does happen. That happens throughout the war. The Japanese tended to overclaim a bit more than the Americans. And, a classic example, Battle of Midway. The first strike on the island, the Marines are able to put up 21 fighters to stop the attack. And that, about 40 Zeros jumped them. There were 15 Buffalo and 6 Wildcats, and Japanese shoot down 13 Buffalo and 2 Wildcats, 15, and they lose 2 of their own. So they decimated the Marine force, but they claimed 41, air-to-air victories, and they're only 21 airborne. So it does happen. It seemed that the larger the battle, the more aircraft involved, the larger the melee, the more overclaiming happened. All right, so back to David McCampbell. What makes him, in my eyes, the top gun of aces, American aces of the war? And by the way, if you ever compare our aces to, let's say, Germany, for example, or even the Japanese, but I'm going to pick Germany because, man, do they have pilots that stood out. The leading ace of all time, the leading German ace, and the leading, all-time ace, which will probably never be broken, is Erich Hartmann, who had 352 kills. Second was Gerhard Barkhorn. I'm probably watching that with 301 kills. So how did they get so many kills? Well, I mean, they didn't do tours. Like a Navy pilot would be part of a squadron air wing. They would deploy for, a combat deployment. They would come home. The Army Air Corps may be the same. In Germany, though, they would, they're deployed. They're fighting maybe an Eastern Front, which is where Erich Hartmann scored the majority of his victories. And then he may get some R&R, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and he's right back to it. And I think, he was in combat for 3 straight years. So you can imagine if you take, one thing that stands out about McCampbell when I look at Bong and I look at McGuire is they took multiple tours to score their victories. Now, I'm not knocking them for that, right? Bong, 3 different tours to get his 40 kills. And the Army Air Corps was really pushing him to make him the ace of aces. McCampbell scored all his victories in 5 months of combat. So I think they were deployed for 6 months. 5 months of that was combat, and he scores 34 kills. So, you could take that maybe, if you want to do a hypothetical and go, okay, I'm doing 5 months here. I go back for a month, and then I do another 5 months, and maybe come back for a month, do another 5 months. So you can kind of see maybe that your score, if you're not killed in action or wounded in action, it starts to mount. All right. So David McCampbell, he is an Academy graduate. He graduates, I think he's class of 1933. And Naval Academy guys, they had to go to the surface fleet and serve as a surface warfare officer for 2 years. So he did that. He then reported to Pensacola in Florida. And that's where all naval aviators we start out. And he ended up getting his wings, I think, in 1938, and he becomes a fighter guy. Now, he also becomes what we call as paddles, an LSO, a landing signals officer. Call them paddles because they had their paddles out there and they would direct an aircraft down to trap on board the aircraft carrier. He's on board the USS Wasp when it is sunk by a Japanese submarine in fall of 1942. He survives, comes back, and he's going to stand up VF-15. He's going to be the commanding officer of Fighter Squadron 15, flying the F6F Hellcat. But he's going to then take over as the commander of the air group. We call it air wing now, but he was CAG 15. So he was in charge of, the Hellcats, the Helldimers, etc. So the entire air group. Now that air group is going to become the number 1 air group. They're going to become legendary in the United States Navy. They're going to shoot down in total 315 Japanese aircraft in the air, destroy another 348 Japanese aircraft on the ground, and they are going to sink more enemy ships than any other air group in the United States Navy. Now, one of the reasons I think McCampbell stands out over Bong and McGuire is because he was in a leadership role. He was the commander of an air group, and so he had to command, he had to lead, as well as fly. So he wasn't just a wingman, he would lead strikes. Okay. And that makes you stand out. That gives you greater responsibility than just shooting down aircraft. So, and also McCampbell was 34 years old, which, by the way, that was ancient for World War II. Major Bruce Porter, was a major and leading a fighter squadron at age 24. And he became an ace. He was one of the few aces that flew the Hellcat and Corsair. Didn't make an ace neither, but combined the score, he was an ace. Robin Olds. I think Robin Olds was 22 years old when he commanded his first squadron. I mean, amazingly young. So being 34 years old, McCampbell was ancient. Now, when, CAC 15 deploys, there are 2 days, and 3 battles that are going to stand out, that are going to make McCampbell an absolute legend. So the first battle is going to be on 19 June 1944, and that is the what the Navy calls it, the Marianas Turkey Shoot. And so why is that? Well, basically, it's going to be the second to last carrier battle, and we are going to decimate what's becoming left of the Japanese naval air forces. They're going to lose in this battle. Japanese will lose 3 carriers and approximately 600 aircraft. 450 were carrier based, 300 were based out of Guam. And the morning of 19 June, McCampbell intercepts dive bombers of the Imperial Japanese Navy. We call them Judies. So a fighter was named a boy's name, Japanese Zero, Zeke. The Oscar, the Key 43 was the Oscar, etc. The Judy was a dive bomber, and they named it the Judy. So he intercepts a gaggle of those, and he shoots down 5 to become an ace in a day. Ace in one mission. Okay. So there are an X amount of pilots. I forget how many, but there are going to be other Navy pilots, other Marine Corps pilots who are going to make ace in a day. Now he shoots down 5 Judies. That afternoon, he engages in dogfights with Zeros, and he shoots down 2 A6M Zeros. So now he has 7 victories for the day, which is a huge standout. There were 1 or 2 instances in which pilots, one was Shomo. He was flying, I want to say P-51, that shot down 7 Japanese aircraft on one mission, and a U.S. Marine Corps pilot, and I forget who exactly, he also shot down 7. But these were 7 total, so 5 on one mission and 2. But what's going to make McCampbell an absolute legend is what happens on the Battle of Leyte Gulf. So this is going to be the largest naval battle of the war, and I think the largest naval battle in terms of personnel in history. All right, we're not going to go too much into that, okay? But basically, we based in the Japanese Navy, okay? And the Japanese are going to lose about 12,000 killed, 1 fleet carrier, 3 light carriers, 3 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 4 light cruisers, okay? And approximately 300 aircraft. And what happens on, let's see, what date was it? 24 October 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. McCampbell was not supposed to fly. He was ordered not to fly, but he ended up taking a flight with his wingman on that day, Roy Rushing, and they launch and they intercept a gaggle of 60 Japanese aircraft made up of the A6M Zero and the Key 43 Oscar. You understand, by this time of the war, the Japanese, they do not have the ability to keep up with the losses, both in terms of aircraft manufactured and pilots. So at the beginning of the war, let's say the Japanese on average, by the time a pilot would get to the fleet, 300 to 500 hours, very experienced. By this time, they're maybe getting 50 hours. Okay, so they are novice pilots, and this gaggle most likely was a kamikaze pilot, so it's supposed to be one way. I believe they did have bombs on them. So when McCampbell and his wingman, tear into this group, they spend the next 90 or so minutes just shooting an aircraft. McCampbell is going to shoot down 9 Japanese aircraft, 7 Zeros, 2 different types of Zeros in there. And he shoots down 2 Key 43 Oscars, and he has 2 probables. So that's 9. And his wingman shoots down 6 Japanese aircraft. So between them, they shoot down 15. And the Japanese aircraft, beginning of the war, the Key 43 and Japanese Zero were simply outstanding. Below 250 miles an hour, they can outmaneuver all the way to the end of the war. Anything that we could field against them. But they had 2 major flaws. One was no armor protection for the pilot around the cockpit that had that. And they had their fuel tanks were not sealed. We're called sealed fuel tanks. Okay. So American aircraft, we had armor around the pilot, and our fuel tanks were sealed so that they didn't light up when they were hit, for the most part. Japanese aircraft, a few hits right in the fuel tank and the wing, the engine, oftentimes they were a goner. So McCampbell, claims 9. He gets back and he traps. He's been airborne for 95, 98 minutes or so. He traps and his engine shuts down. It just quits because he's out of fuel. And so they have to tell him. And then, he launched with a full load of ammo, and he had exactly 2 50 caliber rounds. And that was the armament of the Hellcat. It had 3 guns in each wing, so 6 guns, 50 cal. So for that day's action, McCampbell is going to be awarded the Medal of Honor. I believe for his first, ace in a day in June, he was awarded the Navy Cross. So he's the only U.S. pilot to make ace twice in a day. In 3 missions, he shot down 16 aircraft. Nobody came close in the Marine Corps, Army Air Corps, or the Navy to that. He shot down 34 aircraft in 5 months. Again, Bong McGuire didn't come close to that. And he did so while leading an air group of, hundreds of pilots and aircraft. So that's why I think he stands out as the ace of aces. Nothing against Bong McGuire, nothing against, Marine Corps aces, Joe Foss, who I met. I might talk about him in the future. Great man, great American. He's since long passed away. But anyways, those are my thoughts on and my story about David McCampbell, the Navy's top gun, and in my opinion, the top gun on the U.S. side of World War II. So, bunk out.